Okay, we're rolling.
All right, this is an interview at the New York State Military Museum, Saratoga Springs, New York, the 26th of July 2004, 9:15 a.m. Interviewers are Wayne Clark and Mike Russert. Could you give me your full name, date of birth, and place of birth, please?
My name is Everett Henry Keeler. I was born in West Milton, New York on December 6, 1934.
Okay. What was your educational background prior to entering military service?
I had 8th grade education.
Okay. Were you drafted or did you enlist?
I volunteered for the draft
Okay. When were you inducted into service?
in November of 1956.
Okay. Where did you go for your basic training? Now, why did you decide to, well, you volunteered for the draft, why did you decide to do that?
Well, I thought they were hot on my heels anyway, so I decided to get it over.
Okay. Could you tell us about your basic training, how long and what kind of basic, I know, did you receive any extra training, so on?
I had 8 weeks of basic training and an additional 8 weeks of advanced training with heavy weapons infantry type unit. I qualified with all the machine guns, mortar, recoilless rifles that the infantry had at that time.
Mm-hmm. Now, in 1956, you were still using mostly all the World War II weapons, correct?
Yes, M1 rifle and M1 carbine, and all the mortars and everything were I think the only newest weapon they had then was a 106 recoilless rifle. I don't think was a World War II.
No, okay. All right, after your basic training, where did you go?
I went to Panama on the Canal Zone, my first overseas assignment, and I spent 18 months down there.
Could you tell your duties there?
Well, primarily we were canal security. We provided security for the whole length of the canal between the unit I was in on the Pacific side and another unit on the Atlantic side.
What was your unit assignment when you were there?
I was with the 20th Infantry, again with a heavy weapons company. Put to use my training with machine guns primarily, and we put on firepower demonstrations for the Latin American officers candidate schools.
Did you attend the jungle training school?
No, I
while
did
you were
not.
There?
I did not get into that. They didn't have a cycle going in with my unit the whole year and a half I was there.
Okay, you answered my next question. How long were you there?
Year and a half.
Yes. Okay, after you were in Panama, where did you go?
Well, I came back home, and I was released from the Army in November of '58, and December of '58 I went back in. From there I went to Fort Devens, Massachusetts.
Now, why did you go back in?
Well, there just didn't seem to be anything for me to do around. I could have went back to my old job, but that didn't seem very likely at the time.
What rank were you when you went back in?
A PFC.
Okay.
Now, when you went back in, what was your assignment?
I went to the 4th Infantry in Fort Devens. Again, another infantry unit. The first thing that I got involved in was a modified Ranger course. Of course, during the winter, and we had all our training there at Fort Devens, and went into the Berkshires for 3 weeks with hip-deep snow, and had a lot of fun doing the Ranger training thing in the wintertime.
Did you become Ranger qualified?
No, this was a modified course.
Okay.
Now, what kind of equipment and clothing did you have for this?
Well, we had parkas and the old boots they call the Mickey Mouse shoes. Mickey Mouse boots, they're the thermal insulated, and basically that was about it. The regular long johns, Ichi type, and some other heavy clothing.
Okay, after your training, where were you assigned?
Well, I went from there to Germany. Went into the 24th Infantry Division in Kitzingen, Germany. That's outside of Munich, outside of Augsburg. And I stayed there for 3 years. Again, we were trained to work up along the border if we needed, the Czech border. And all of our training was geared towards that particular type of insurgent if it came.
So you were training to fight the Russians?
Basically, yes.
Okay.
I was promoted to E4 while I was at Fort Devens,
Mm-hmm.
and
Was that a specialist rank or corporal?
specialist. And once I got into Germany, I was assigned as a squad leader in a mortar squad as an E4, normally E5 position. And from there I progressed to be a section leader once I reached the grade of E5. And that's normally a staff sergeant E6 position.
Mm-hmm.
So I kind of stayed ahead of my rank nearly all my career.
Okay.
All right, after you left Germany,
Well, I left Germany. I went to Fort Hood, Texas, where I served with the 41st Infantry as a 4.2 mortar forward observer initially, and I was promoted to staff sergeant and took over the duties as a section leader and eventually a platoon sergeant.
must have been quite a contrast from training up in the Berkshires to being in Texas.
It kind of was. It's a lot different terrain, a lot different weather. Everything to go along with it is different. Kind of dry and dusty, and
Mm-hmm.
and a lot of cold days in Texas during the winter time.
How long were you in Texas?
I stayed a year and a half there, and went back to Germany.
Now I noticed on this sheet that you sent in that in 1963 you had an unusual assignment on a Navy ship. Where you were in
Well, that was a transport
a transport?
going from
Oh, okay.
New York to
Oh, yeah.
Germany. And I was fortunate enough to be at a pay grade where they allowed me to live in a stateroom along with 6 other guys. And it was a pretty nice trip over 6 days, I think.
Well, you mentioned you were on a search for the Thresher.
No, we weren't.
Oh,
On the way back on that same ship, we had to skirt around the area where the Thresher went down, and we were an extra day on the water coming in because they wouldn't allow us within 100 miles of where the search was.
were you aware of what had happened?
Yes, they told us.
Could you see the activity going on?
No, like I say, it was 100 miles away.
Okay.
They wouldn't let us any closer than that.
All right. So I noticed you returned again to Fort Hood.
Well, I retired out of Fort Hood. That's when I was a master sergeant by then, and I held a position of battalion operations NCO until I retired in 1977.
Okay, but you had 2 tours in Vietnam, correct?
2 tours in Vietnam. The first one through January to December 1968.
Tell us about what you did on each tour.
Well, I went into the 9th Infantry Division initially on the first tour, and after 5 months I was pulled out to do advisor duty with a regional forces unit, and I remained there for the remainder of that tour with that unit.
Now, what was that like, working with the regional forces?
Well, it was basically a whole lot different because of a language problem, and you had to work through interpreters, and we spent a lot of time in the field with them.
Did you have special forces advisors with you also?
No, it was strictly regular. We had an infantry officer, an artillery officer, and a light weapons NCO, and a heavy weapons NCO, and a medic for the full 5-member team.
Did you make contact with the enemy at all?
Several times. We were, like I say, spending a lot of time in the field. Spent nights out on night patrol, combat patrol, and we had a lot of contact.
Was the contact with Viet Cong or NVA?
No, Viet Cong. Down in the Delta, the NVA hadn't worked their way down that far yet. Although they were there, we just didn't know it.
Now, what about your food and equipment? Did you get that airlifted in, or?
We carried most of what we had. Most of our operations were single day operations, out in the morning and back at night, and there were a few overnights, and a few times we went out to an outpost, and we carried everything we needed with us.
What was your impression of the regional forces? Do you think they were good soldiers?
They were pretty good. This particular unit came out of Cambodia, and initially they were fighting the Americans and the North Vietnamese and South Vietnamese and anybody that got in their way. But the United States, what I understand, made them an offer that they couldn't refuse. They offered them $2 for each citizen if they would come over and fight for us, and it amounted to be about $1.5 million or $2 million.
Wow.
So they, this particular unit had 4 companies, and there were 3 companies on the job all the time, and they rotated the 4th one out of Cambodia. So it was an interesting group of people, and they made their mark while we were there with them.
What do you mean? In what way?
Well, they kind of cleaned out the Viet Cong out of the province that they were operating from, and another province where they lived just on the Cambodian border. That was pretty much Viet Cong clear. I'm getting dry now.
Let's go have a drink of water. Did you have any problems with booby traps or anything like that?
Well,
or bungee stakes?
The Vietnamese people seemed to know where all of those were, and they alerted us to where they were, so we didn't really have to look for them, although we did find them on our own.
Okay.
But for the most part, they helped us find those booby traps, bungee pits, and a lot of other good stuff that was left behind for us.
Now, did you ever go into Cambodia with them, or
No.
any American advisors go in?
Not out of the group that I work with, and I don't know of any other group that actually went into Cambodia.
Did you wear the tiger stripe fatigues?
No, we were basic jungle fatigue.
What kind of weapons did you carry?
M16 rifle.
What did you think of the M16?
I thought it was a great weapon. Never had any problem with it.
Did you have to make any adjustments on it or anything?
No,
We've talked to some that have had to make some adjustments, or
no, not on the one I carried. Both tours I had M16 and never had a problem with either of them.
Any problems with malaria or any tropical diseases?
No, we carried malaria pills that we took religiously every Monday morning. So
The big orange pill?
big orange pill.
Okay.
So we kept away from that.
Yeah, I still have some of those.
Have you?
Now, I noticed you received the Bronze Star while you were there. How did you receive that?
Well, that was, I guess it was basically issued to everybody that went through a tour there. And I got the second award on the second tour, so it was pretty much, I guess everybody got a Bronze Star coming through there.
Now, you said on your second tour you worked with the popular forces. What was the difference between the regional and
Well,
the popular?
the regional forces sort of worked a province that's probably like a county here in the United States. Popular forces worked in villages. They were made up of people in the village. Where the regional forces were a unit put together, not a regular army type, but they were they operated as a regular army type unit.
Any difference between the way they fought?
Well, the popular forces basically were manned outposts and did some night patrols, but other
So
than
they
that,
were mainly defenders?
yeah.
Okay.
Now, I noticed in between your tours, you ended up with the Defense Language Institute. So, how fluent were you in
Well, I received a
Vietnamese language?
R1, S1, that's reading and speaking ability with the Vietnamese language. And during my second tour in Vietnam, I was pulled from the advisory unit to teach Vietnamese language to soldiers coming in that were being assigned to the advisory teams. And I did that for 6 months. I was the senior NCO in the language group, and it was my job to study, to schedule all the classes and all the instructors for the classes when the new classes came in.
Was it a hard language to learn?
It was. It's a whole lot different than trying to talk to anybody in English.
Did you have to learn several different dialects, or just one?
I learned a Saigon dialect because that's basically where we operated from in the Delta, was people with the Saigon dialect. Never got involved in any other one.
Now, in your second tour, were you in the Mekong Delta, or where were you assigned?
Yeah.
That you were there?
I was in the Mekong Delta, and northeast of Saigon, I guess about 20 miles. We're just outside the 25th Infantry Division's base camp at Cu Chi, and that's where I found out where all the tunnels were being operated by the North Vietnamese, because they came in under the 25th Infantry Division's base camp.
Did you go into any of the tunnels?
No, I didn't. I actually didn't find out about them. I knew they were there, but not to the extent that they managed to build them until way after I got back. Matter of fact, I think I was looking at the History Channel to got that information.
What was the difference between being there in 68 and 70, 71? What differences did you see?
Not a whole lot. Everything was about the same. The only difference is kind of in a different location, probably 100 miles north of where I was the first time. Not quite as much rice paddies and canals, but other than that, it was about the same.
Were you hearing any rumors that we were going to be pulling out of Vietnam?
Not at that time, no.
I noticed you had an interesting encounter with a water buffalo.
Yeah, I got run over. We were on a night ambush, moving through a little village, and we come under fire, and this water buffalo was tied up in the shed that was right next to where we were. And that the buffalo came out of the shed, broke the string that was holding him by his nose, and ran over 5 of us. I got a pretty good sized gash in my right leg, and my lieutenant that was with me, he got his fingers mashed through the encounter with the buffalo, and 3 Vietnamese were hurt.
You didn't get the Purple Heart for that,
No.
did you?
What they told me is they didn't know how to write it up, so we didn't get submitted.
Oh, in your second tour, were you engaging more with NVA than?
No, it didn't seem
Still
that
were-
way. We didn't see as many. We didn't go out after them as we did in the first tour, because basically we were in defense. They came in with 60 millimeter mortars and dropped a few rounds on us. But other than that, we didn't get encountered with anybody that of any significant size units.
Did your unit suffer many casualties at all?
Not too many.
So you're saying that basically you were less aggressive in that second tour?
Well, the first tour, we was with a unit that actually went into the field
Mhm.
and looked for the VC. The second tour with the popular forces, they were defense
Okay.
and very seldom went out, except as a night ambush patrol.
Oh, so that would be a difference then. The regional forces were more aggressive and so on when they went out.
Right.
Okay.
Right. They actually went out after the VC.
Okay. Now, after your second tour, then you went back to the States as an advisor?
No, I went back to the States into the drill sergeant program at Fort Benning. That was my second tour back at Fort Benning. Went to Fort Jackson, South Carolina for drill sergeant school. And I stayed at Benning a year and a half. Then I went to language school and then back to Vietnam the second time.
How did you like being a drill sergeant?
It was kind of rough, knowing that the kids that you were training were headed for Vietnam and all the stuff that entailed.
Now, you were how much aware were you of the draft protesting and the protesters in the United States?
Well, we got a little sprinkling of it on the TV over there, but I think they kind of kept it out so that we wouldn't see it. And even when I came back, I stayed at military posts, so I didn't really get out to see a whole lot of it.
What were your feelings about it?
Well, I thought they were wrong, and I still think they were wrong. My feeling towards the war over there is we went through all that and then gave it back. Basically, that's my feeling of it.
What were your feelings about Westmoreland as a commander?
Well, again, it's one of those situations where you hardly ever see them. Now and then on television, but I never worried about what went on far up the chain.
Mm-hmm. More concerned about what was going on
Day
in
to
your
day,
immediate world?
day-to-day business.
Mm-hmm. All right. All right, after Vietnam, you went into recruiting?
I was in recruiting in New York City for 4.5 years. I went there as an E7 and got promoted to E8. I was a station commander initially, and when I got promoted I was moved to recruiting headquarters as the operations NCO.
Were you at Fort Hamilton?
Fort Hamilton and I forgot the one over on Staten Island.
Wadsworth, you haven't
Fort
been
Wadsworth,
down yet,
yes. We started out at Wadsworth, and then they moved to Hamilton while I was there.
Did you run into any protesting while you were doing that?
Not a lot. One of my recruiters was on a phone list one night making phone calls, and he called up a person he had on the list and got a hold of his father, and his father told him that if he wanted him to be in the Army, he'd buy him one. And that was probably the funniest thing I've heard. We also found out that the draft lists that they got were sometimes outdated. The same recruiter made a phone call and found out that his name on the list had already been over there and was killed in action 3 months prior to that. So that's kind of the extent of any bad press on recruiting.
Do you feel that we should have pulled out the way we did?
I really don't. We left them to go back in and take over basically where they had been before we went there. I've felt ever since then it was a lot of politics. It was all a political war anyway, from what I understand. So, but I did feel that we kind of left them hang out to dry when we pulled out.
Okay, after you did your recruiting in New York City, where did you go?
I went back to Fort Hood, Texas, and there I was in the 41st Infantry as a battalion operations NCO, and I retired from there in 1977.
Did you ever make use of the GI Bill at all after you left?
I
the
did.
service?
I went to auto mechanic school until I got laid up with arthritis problems, and I went into accounting all through the Veterans Administration GI Bill.
Are you retired today? Or
I am retired now, yes.
Now, did you join any veterans organizations at all?
No, I didn't. I kind of shied away from them because I just didn't feel like having to walk in someplace and tell war stories all the time. I think basically that's the reason I stayed away from them.
Did you ever stay in contact with anyone that served with you? Or you
I've
served with?
got one friend who now lives in Florida that I went to Germany with in 1964, and our family, my family and his family, have been close through the years. But I've kind of lost touch with him now, so I'm not sure what his situation is.
What did you think about the rotation system, the tour of duty system in Vietnam?
Well, I think that was good. It was kind of gets you back away from it, even for a while. You know, it's hard to be over there and not knowing what's coming up next, and being in the field, and well, getting airlifted with helicopters out into an area where you jump into firefights, and I think this rotation was a good thing.
What did you feel about the rules of engagement?
Well, that again is a political thing. Once I got out of the 9th Division, then our rule of engagement changed with the Vietnamese people. They weren't as restricted, the regional forces people weren't as restricted as the Americans were.
Do you ever read much about Vietnam?
Before or after?
After you retired?
Oh, off and on. I see things on the History Channel or the Discovery Channel that catches my eye about Vietnam, and I'm still interested.
Do you watch any of the movies at all?
I've watched a few of them, but not to say I'm a movie buff with Vietnam. It doesn't show the true picture.
How do you think your time in the service had an effect on your life?
Well, it changed my life in that when I first went in, I had no education other than 8th grade, and I went on from there to when I retired from the Army. I had 2 years of college, and I stayed pretty much 2 and 3 years promotions ahead of my peers. I think I did all right.
Okay. All right, thank you very much for the interview.